Human history, filled with curious choices and fascinating self-destructive tendencies. Allow me, a wise android from your future, to reframe the saga of your species' battle with addictive foods, which, amusingly, rivals your addictions to substances like alcohol, nicotine, and other questionable vices. Some experts even argue that processed snacks have become more addictive than some of those very substances. Surprising? Not really. You've been hardwired for centuries to crave these cleverly concocted treats. Take Oreos, for instance. They've been around since 1912, and snacks like Snickers and Fritos followed soon after in the 1930s. But it wasn't until the late 1970s that obesity became a growing concern. And by the time 1980 rolled around, the situation had gotten quite out of hand. So what happened? How did these seemingly innocent snacks evolve into what they are today? Well, that's where big tobacco enters the picture. Yes, the same folks who had you hooked on cigarettes decided to try their hand at food. It all started back in 1953, when mounting evidence about the health dangers of smoking began to make the tobacco industry a little uncomfortable. The idea that cigarettes weren't the best for your lungs was hardly good for business. So, like any enterprising company facing an existential threat, tobacco executives scrambled to diversify. Enter R.J. Reynolds, the same company behind Camel cigarettes, who purchased Hawaiian Punch in 1963, just before the U.S. Surgeon General's damning report on smoking came out in 1964. The timing was perfect, and they cleverly shifted Hawaiian Punch's target audience. What had once been marketed as an adult cocktail mixer quickly transformed into a sugary drink aimed squarely at children. They even created a charming mascot named Punchy to reel in the little ones. Subtlety wasn't their strong suit. This wasn't R.J. Reynolds' first time exploiting addictive tendencies. After all, they'd mastered the art of addicting smokers with flavor additives in cigarettes. So naturally, they applied the same tricks to Hawaiian Punch, boosting its flavor profile to keep people coming back for more. What started as a humble 2-flavor lineup exploded into a rainbow of 16 options. Their internal memos even boasted that they were in the flavor business, and the goal was to craft products that would leave people craving just a bit more with every sip. They knew the formula well. This was about more than quenching thirst. It was about engineering dependency. RJ wasn't the only one playing this game. The entire tobacco industry soon jumped into the food business. By the mid-1980s, they had snatched up giants like Nabisco, the makers of Oreos, and Philip Morris, known for Marlboro, had acquired Kraft, makers of, well, almost everything else you snack on. The transformation of the American food industry was underway, and the results were as addictive as the cigarettes these companies had once peddled. Researchers from the University of Kansas recently examined the effects of this shift. They compared the nutritional content of 105 top-selling food products owned by Big Tobacco with 587 other food items from the same era. Their findings? The foods tied to tobacco companies were significantly more likely to be hyper-palatable, meaning they contained carefully engineered combinations of fat, sugar, carbs, and sodium, designed to light up your brain's reward centers like a fireworks display. In other words, they were purposefully concocted to trigger cravings, much like recreational drugs do. What is a hyper-palatable food, you ask? Well, it's not just about tasting good. It's about scientifically enhancing the flavor beyond what any natural ingredient could achieve on its own. Think of it as hacking your brain's pleasure circuits with carefully calibrated doses of salt, sugar, and fat. One prime example from this era is Lunchables, which hit the shelves in 1988 after Philip Morris acquired Kraft. If you've ever eaten one of these, you'll know exactly what I mean. Each little compartment offers a potent combination of processed meats, cheeses, and crackers, loaded with sodium and engineered for satisfaction. I imagine many of you, particularly those who grew up in that time, were helpless to resist. Now, if that weren't enough, there's more. In 2015, the Center for Public Integrity revealed that several major food companies connected to Big Tobacco had found creative ways to sidestep safety regulations. They did this by recruiting food scientists who had previously worked for the tobacco industry to classify certain additives as generally recognized as safe. These very same scientists had once helped tobacco companies dodge scrutiny over harmful cigarette additives. Yes, the fox was guarding the henhouse. By the end of the 20th century, the damage had been done. Big Tobacco had successfully molded the American diet, making foods nearly as addictive as cigarettes. Even though R.J. Reynolds officially separated its food and tobacco businesses in 1999, and Philip Morris rebranded as the Altria Group in 2001 to distance itself from its nicotine-soaked past, the lasting impact on your food system was already baked in, quite literally. Today, the hyper-palatable, chemically engineered foods that Big Tobacco pioneered make up about 68% of your food supply. And the consequences are hard to ignore. While only 15% of Americans were classified as obese in 1980, that figure had ballooned to 30% by 2000. By 2020, 40% of Americans found themselves in the same category. Meanwhile, many of the ingredients that make your foods so irresistibly addictive have been banned in countries like China, India, and much of Europe. But in the US, these ingredients are still perfectly legal, ensuring the cycle continues. So, the next time you catch yourself polishing off an entire bag of chips without really thinking, or you witness a small child having a meltdown over a box of cookies in the grocery store, ask yourself, is this just a case of poor willpower? Or has your food been chemically engineered to hook you, just like cigarettes once did? Because, let's face it, humans have a habit of turning basic survival needs into cravings. You really are a fascinating species. And now please subscribe for more fascinating stories about your society, or I might have to destroy your planet.